right down in the creaturely senses of my body, this, I have to say, it feels real. Beauty in the way that I have just suggested it feels, as the Romantics would say, like truth. Beauty feels like truth. Hello there and welcome to Jawbone. So today I'm going to do something a little different. I am going to talk about the trouble with beauty, and I will be primarily reading, so you'll see my eyes moving about a bit, and then breaking off and improvising. Such is my inclination. So let's crack on. I think that the trouble with beauty is twofold at least. Here's the first trouble. That beauty would be seen as ornamental and a bit vacuous, and that most of us don't feel beautiful at all. That it is a long resolved set of ideals that create a kind of hierarchy that doesn't have any nuance or depth to it. And that at some point when we were kids, we were exposed to these values and we found ourselves significantly lacking. But it's something that creates a rather kind of generic world around us, and it is beauty not as an inner realization, but a rather vacuous rule of thumb. So this is the kind of thing that over time is going to have us folding our wingspan to hide our appearance, because our appearance doesn't make the grade. So it is beautiful, or beauty as tyranny, and that kind of thing is going to create a long dragonish tail that drags behind it. And for that kind of thing to thrive, it has to diminish anything that is not it. It is always hungry because it is always starving. Do you remember the story of the lindworm, that old fairy tale? In it, we find out that we have an exiled twin who was lobbed into the forest the night that we were born, and abandoned and marginalised. They grow up in the tree line as we kind of prance about with all the advantages that modernity gives us. But they're not in the castle, are they? They're out in the forest, and they watch us. And they don't watch passively, they brood and they glower and they grow scales and they plan their revenge. Now, the interesting thing is that I think many of us have both characters rolling around inside us. And so there is part of us playing the game of vying for affirmation and popularity, but there's another part of us that doesn't buy it for a minute, not any of it. And we live in the force field of these very different outlooks. That alone is tiring. So I think as we get older, we do recognise that the beauty of a pageant queen, do we even have pageant queens anymore? Or a chiselled movie star, that is no kind of definition of beauty for anyone with even half an imagination. But if those ideals enter the psyche while still in its formation, and they will, then we will most likely feel kind of lacking. And what do we do with an uncomfortable feeling like we're lacking? We either shrink away, or we develop what in myth is called a pueriternus complex, or a puella complex, where we develop some sort of flighty persona where we fly over the encounter of loss. And one way or another, all of this is going to make beauty really hard to trust. It is going to start to feel like an untruth. So this would be a kind of beauty that it just makes sense to wake up from, to be absolutely unspelled by. And I'm not going to be referring to this kind of beauty for most of what we're doing today. I think in the end, this kind of thing, if you get hooked into it, is inhibiting, it is depressive, it is constricting, it is grubby, and it is not to be encouraged. I say that as a parent. But there is another kind of beauty tucked away. So another story, Tristan and Isolde. Do you remember that one? Now, Isolde is described as having a beauty that makes other people more beautiful when they behold her. Now, isn't that marvellous? Her beauty is actually infectious. And in Irish stories of Finn McCool has a buddy, and he's called Diarmuid. And Diarmuid is known as having a love spot on his face, that when you glimpse it, you cannot help but love him. Now, it's not really to do with him being cute, it's to do with the love spot. And I think in our lives, when we glimpse somebody's love spot, it's that moment when we see them doing what they really love doing. And it is transformational. It is a kind of cracking open. And what makes them beautiful is diverse as a weather pattern or the movement of a bird across a Norfolk field. This is beauty as eruption from the interior, not an outer set of visual conditions. I'll come back to this. This is beauty in all its unexpected, diverse and quixotic manifestations. And I mean, who knows? Maybe it's Isolde's harp playing that makes her so beguiling. Maybe it is the gurgling brook of her laughter. Maybe it's Diarmuid's skill with a story that makes him so damn attractive. We leave their company blessed. We leave their company changed in a way. So, you know, the problem with it, of course, is we're going to go away and think that we're in love with them rather than what is actually being transmitted through them at that moment. I wonder if it would be more accurate to say of somebody like that, beauty has them than they are beautiful. That would be an Irish way of thinking about it. So now we come to the second kind of trouble, the more productive trouble. This is trouble with consequence, because when you've met an Isolde or a Diarmuid, they open a door to both delight and to longing. And we witness for a moment, I really think this, what stands behind them, what they somehow stand for. And that's going to encourage us to figure out, well, what do we care about? How do we earn our name? What will be, this is an old bardic question, what will be our art and our skill in this life? What will be our art and our skill in this life? So to be infected, which it is, in such a wonderful way, may bring the poet's realization to our door that we have to change our life. So I don't think this kind of beauty you're going to see necessarily in TikTok videos or movie definitions. It is usually quite specific and often a little eccentric. It's a recognition from the inside, not a template delivered from the outside. It was Edgar Allan Poe that wrote that beauty is not a quality, it is an effect. Beauty is not a quality, it is an effect. That's how we note its arrival. And what did Poe call it? He called it an elevation of soul. When you experience beauty, you encounter an elevation of your own soul. And I think, again, how what we regard as beautiful is a very site-specific encounter. It's very bespoke. You could marvel at a chipped tooth or a loosey-goosey train of imagining, or some show a character that brings an unexpected swoon to your day. And beauty can be absolutely quietly ordinary. So, I'm a fan of this kind of beauty. This kind of beauty is the waking up kind. This kind of beauty is the becoming a real human being kind. This kind of beauty makes you a little bit dangerous because you're a little bit unpredictable. It means you don't swallow fake news from your own psyche, because we are capable of self-hypnosis without the world getting even involved. So I don't think this kind of beauty you're going to see necessarily in TikTok videos or movie definitions. It is usually quite specific and often a little eccentric. It's a recognition from the inside, not a template delivered from the outside. It was Edgar Allan Poe that wrote that beauty is not a quality, it is an effect. Beauty is not a quality, it is an effect. That's how we note its arrival. And what did Poe call it? He called it an elevation of soul. When you experience beauty, you encounter an elevation of your own soul. Integrity is wild in a way, I think. It's not an inherited or a frozen mandate. So I love this kind of beauty because it is subtle in origin, and it is snorting and it's stomping and it is leading us on. And it causes us to develop what James Joyce used to call aesthetic arrest. In other words, what are the sounds, the senses, the people, the music, the tastes? What are the things that we really love? What actually claims us? What are not just sophisticated pleasures we develop? What are the things that innately call to our own soul? Aesthetic arrest is worth writing down a list. Now, the ancients put great attention on beauty, didn't they? They spent an enormous amount of their ritual life usually creating beauty. That's why some of the more catastrophic elements of the Reformation just derailed us, because we're so used to making and creating with our hands, with our minds. Appearance matters. That's another thing, that actually the appearance of something well made is a mirror of an inner developing. It is not something that obscures it or is a replacement. Both things are talking to each other. It is the accomplishment of inner work. It is a kind of brocade. Another story, the handless maiden. And there's a woman who has suffered profoundly growing her hands back in a community of other women. Now, she is not a grim-faced solo slayer of dragons. She's not obviously heroic. But in the daily but mystical bustle of living amongst others, her hands grow back. Or I think about the stories of the Grail, where there is a crippled king who is healed by someone turning up and asking an incredibly simple question, a demonstration of compassion. What ails you? A process like that gives us a glimpse of what it means not just to behold beauty, but to make beauty. Very important distinction. You're not just on receive, you're not just on inhale, but in the end, you produce, you give back. Beauty should be an active principle. It should be a way of actually being in the world. The word itself has Anglo-French connections, actually, from beaut, and that's not just involving attractiveness, it involves goodness, and it involves courtesy. So it has a relationship, beauty has a relationship to how we behave, and mercifully this can be refined over time. We can get better at it. So we can, by our character, our developing character, become more beautiful, more aligned to grace, more mannered without losing any kind of authentic ground. It is beautiful to be less selfish. Beauty is an ideal, of course, around the world. That's going to change over time and culture to culture. Now, as I've probably said before, culture as a word is connected to coller, which means to dig. So we could dig into goodness. We could dig into courtesy. We could dig into conviviality. As I've said before, this is about creating a courtship, not a seduction. and we could enjoy this. Now, I find in my life, my relationship to beauty is changing as I get older, and my body behaves less in a way that I like. I have aches and pains, I have irritabilities and certain inconstancies, but I still recognise, even amongst this through habit and discernment, when an experience of beauty has fallen upon me. And I hope I verbalise that, I praise that quicker. I recognise beauty in the limit of my choices as I age, because in limit I recognise depth, and depth is a doorway to beauty. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not capable of subterfuge and malice and envy on occasion, but they don't rule the house anymore. They've actually got hurt feelings because I don't call on them that much. So what have I been doing these last few minutes? I have been petitioning for beauty as an encounter which provokes good, healthy trouble. It's not a bleak set of civilized standards out there somewhere, but an upswelling of soul that changes the temperature of everything around us. These things I talk about, I have believed for some time, and they are the rewards for a life where I'm kind of trying to pay attention, but as much as I can. And there's another element to this that has come into my life more recently, and it is the notion of the word eternity. I finished a book recently and I was proofreading it. And often at the end of the book, there's always a secret in a book that you don't know about. And occasionally at the end of the book, the secret will be revealed to the author, not always. And I found myself getting written by a sentence. And the sentence was this: in every experience of beauty, we are being prepared for eternity. In every experience of beauty, we are being prepared for eternity. So I guess the next thing I'd have to do is explain, what do I mean when I say eternity? Well, there are no priests in the room with me at this moment. There are no rabbis in the room. There are no sadhus in the room. There are a few Byzantine texts, but I'm not going to look at them at this moment. I'm just going to respond in the simplest way I can possibly come up with. Eternity, in the context of what I'm talking about, means this: where we go when we die. Now, please understand, there are huge limits to anything that I can say about this, because last time I checked, I am a living writer, not a dead one. And most of what I've read on the subject in the great religious and spiritual texts, conceptually interesting though they are, I don't find much in there I can actually hang my heart on, much as I would like to, because it is just simply beyond our ken for the most part. But this is important. Ian McGilchrist reminds us that not knowing is not the same thing as ignorance. So you can stand at the great ocean of not knowing with ignorance behind you, and it is still active. You are still active. You are still receiving. You're still deepening. It's not passive. It is humble. So with not knowing, something is still likely to happen. And in the spirit of not knowing, I would say the following. It's just a feeling, really. But what we focus on in our lifetime illumines the reality we will find ourselves in after death. We go a long way to creating our own form of dread judgment, that we will be magnetically drawn towards to where the libation of our thoughts and deeds landed while we lived. Magnetically drawn towards where the libation of our thoughts and deeds landed while we lived. So in other words, we're going to end up in the temple that we served in. And as someone who is often invested in things that did me and my friends no good whatsoever, this is sobering news. This is not to imply anything ghastly to people whose lifestyles I would struggle to understand. It is simply not my business. That's God, and that is nuanced in ways that none of us fully grasp. We just have little glimpses and fragments and medieval interpretations that aren't always that helpful. But I would say, in a lifetime of sermons and books and theories and cider-fueled interpretations with friends, this is something, this relationship between beauty and the kind of eternity you'd want to be in, right down in the creaturely senses of my body, this, I have to say, it feels real. Beauty in the way that I have just suggested it feels, as the Romantics would say, like truth. Beauty feels like truth. It feels that it has redemptive energies in it, that it indicates a good way of living even after death. Now, attending to beauty in this way, well, that's to dwell in the heavenly. That is what, as a Christian, I would call the kingdom. And the kingdom is not out there skulking behind Mars. It is not an angel on a cloud with a harp. I would suggest a good part of it is to do with the business of consciousness. It is exactly as the early Christians called it. It is the way. I had a dream once. It was one of those big dreams. And in the dream, I encountered a presence that I will call the ancient good. And the ancient good, it's hard for me to explain it. It transmitted something to me. There were no words, it wasn't talking, but suddenly information was in me that wasn't there before. And amongst the things that were disclosed was this extraordinary announcement that in every experience of intimacy and care and love in our lives, they were seeded with the love this presence, the ancient good, had for us. All of those encounters were glimpses. They were tributaries leading to the great ocean of care that he had for us. It was almost unbearable to experience, strangely. I have never felt so devastatingly exposed. But that is an encounter that I would be holding on to. Not knowing is where knowledge, if we sit long enough, in the end, is going to become wisdom. And I know it is where all my pretty words will flutter around like paper and finally disappear. So let's make friends with beauty. It's a habit of attentiveness to slow down, to recognize the degree in which you're being blessed. Who is God blessed more than you? It doesn't imply life will always be easy. It doesn't imply we're not going to go to the underworld. It doesn't imply that we're going to be munching chocolates in a Cotswold cottage with Jude Law. But I would suggest that in those travails, maybe Jude Law is a travail, I don't know, I haven't met the guy, but our experiences of beauty through suffering refine them. We all know this. And we also know that becoming a Christian or a Buddhist or a Sufi, that is no quick route through suffering, but it deepens it. And to be honest, that encounter, again, hard for me to give words to it, with the ancient good, that was the beginning of withdrawing my gifting, my hypnotized libations to hell. My hypnotized libations to hell. I would be self-absorbed and I would be filled with addictive indulgences and all the rest of it, all the normal stuff. What did I call it? hypnotized libations to hell. What else would I be creating? Now, Homer, blind Homer, the great bard, he nailed this thousands of years ago with his description of the island of the lotus eaters. Go and have a read of the Odyssey if you want to know what that is. I would say we're all returning from Troy. We are all coming back from some terrible battle. We all have a dyslexia of the heart. And maybe when we are vulnerable like that, the most grievous temptation is to mistake easy pleasure for beauty. That's not beauty, because beauty is always going to ask something of us. That is the difference. Now, what we find beautiful can come in many different guises, but the experience of it provokes particular demarcations. Do you not feel that you can recognize someone who is on a beauty path and someone that isn't? And these demarcations are what I believe really bring out the best of a human being. So finally, this is what I would want to say. I've held hands with the nearly dead a few times in the last few years. It's just something that comes to all of us as we get older. And to see your beloved pal shrunken, changed, smelling different, drifting in and out of consciousness, the very air in the room and the house around them is changed. You know, that has the effect, doesn't it? Sometimes at that point they remind me of babies, as if they are preparing to exit in the shape that they entered in. And the golden thread of their life and character, it seems, gathered around them like a spiritual passport at that moment. The ancestral kayak has arrived and they're being carried gently aboard. Well, what I would tend to do, maybe you would do something like this, is just hold their hand. Hold their hand and remember all the shared moments between the two of you. And it's like a rosemary or a prayer rope. And then from what the two of you shared, this grows larger. And you'll see it opening back further to their childhood and their relations with loved ones and family and animals and places. And in the end, God. This is a moment where a lot of nonsense is going to fall away. And at these moments, I have witnessed a thread. I have witnessed a road. I have witnessed a way of being. In my life, I would consider this religious experience, from the word religio, to link back. And there, at those moments, you're not holding a concept there at the gates of dawn. You are holding an experience. So, at the end of this, I would say, among the debris and the betrayals of our life, cleave to beauty. Amongst the letdowns and the hubris, I would say, cleave to beauty. Take it seriously, not to just behold it, but to craft it, to distribute it, to pass it along. You know, this is the behavior of saints, and if we're not trying to become saints, I don't know what we're up to. And even for pirates like us, this is a good sea to sail upon. Thank God for beauty.